Welcome to They Are Waiting for Us from Forbes Books, the podcast that explores how education can transform lives and communities, featuring conversations with change agents who are making a difference in education, from parents and advocates to teachers and leaders. Here's Dr. Lisa Andrew.
My guest this week is Lesley Slaton Brown, Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at the National Basketball Association. Lesley is a trailblazer in the DEI space, implementing robust processes to drive belonging and opportunity across the NBA. Renowned as one of the most powerful women in corporate diversity, a top influential woman in corporate America, and the Diversity and Inclusion Champion of the Year, Lesley is an inspiring leader paving the way for positive change. Lesley, welcome to They Are Waiting for Us.
Why, thank you, Lisa.
So we're going to get started with some information about your background. I think it's important that our listeners know who you are and why you are uniquely positioned to discuss our topic today. So how did your education and experiences, like playing basketball at Boise State, prepare you for a career in DEI?
It's an interesting question. And I think that my life experiences have prepared me for this work. I grew up in a very diverse, multicultural family and community. And I grew up in a community and then moved into a very homogeneous community that didn't reflect that same level of diversity that I had. In so doing, I think it built some different muscles in me to be able to navigate a little bit of a different world than what I was used to. It built different muscles in me and having allies and advocates coming from my hometown into a community that no one knew me, and to just kind of learn to navigate the world a little bit differently.
I think it's important as we think about the backgrounds that our students come from and communities that our students come from. And while they may have a lot of agency and social capital and fluidity in their hometown, when they embark out into the world, it's like, okay, what do I take into that space that then allows me to thrive as I was in my community? How did you pull on your community back home when you went to Boise State?
I would say a couple of things, and that is the beauty of the way that I grew up. It was like, I call it a blessing in that it was from A to Z. And so I saw diversity in everything, in education and leadership and our law enforcement and how law enforcement interacted within our community. I saw it in our educational opportunities. I saw it in, the people that were advocating for me. So when I got where I didn't have that, I had to kind of pull back on my village, but I also had to start creating my own village. And what I realized was, and I realized this very early on, I was miserable at first in making that transition. And I remember I literally used to call my dad just crying, come get me, And I even sometimes went to the extent of I would make up stuff just so he could think it was bad enough that, like, surely I've got to go get my baby girl, right? And he kept pushing me. And he's like, no, you made a commitment. You can do this. You have all the tools that you need. And the change for me was, and this is so important, the change for me was when I got ingrained in the community that I was in, my new community, and being able to build relationship, being able to kind of understand better the norms of that community. And not that I so much assimilated to that, but I was able to say, okay, you know what? I know what this looks like. I know how to navigate this. That was the turning point for me. And then falling in love with a community of difference, right? Even though I was the one that was different in that community. And so it was reaching out to, I was so fortunate to have my high school English lit teacher and his wife, Mr. and Mrs. Russell, they became surrogate parents of mine. And they would actually travel to Boise. And, of course, my parents, my family, my brother had been in sports in California, and some of his friends were then transferring into the Boise community where I was. And so then I kind of that extended family and the big brothers, that came with that. And so I literally just started recreating or creating a new village for myself.
So describe your first ally at Boise State.
Oh, my first ally at Boise State, and I have to say this without even tearing up, was a woman by the name of Margie Van Voren. She was this amazing woman from the Midwest, country girl. She rode horseback. She had polio, and so she had some physical challenges, but that she never let that stop her. And I happened to run into her one day when I was struggling. This was the end of my second year. And she stopped me and just started talking to me and started asking me. I mean, nobody, at least, a faculty, had ever just really said, like, how are you doing? And like, how are you transitioning? How has it been? What struggles do you have? What challenges? How can I help? And she was the first person that did that with me. And later it turned into a job opportunity.
Those are the best kind of allies,
Yeah.
right?
So Marjorie, unfortunately, is no longer living, but she played a very, very critical role in my success at a time in which I really needed intervention because I was ready to go home. I was ready to pack up and leave.
Yeah, it's the importance of being seen, the importance of not only do I see you, but I'm genuinely interested in knowing you and coming alongside you as well. That didn't cost anything.
A lot of sense.
In this day and age where we're talking about the economy and this and that, and didn't take a law, didn't take a penny, I'm sure her life was enriched by you as well. Knowing you as I do, I'm sure it was reciprocated. So tell us a little bit about why you decided to pursue further education through programs like Stanford's Black Leaders Program.
So I'm a continual learner. I'll start there. And I have this thing that I do. And so once I graduated from undergrad at Boise State, I went straight into corporate America. I did everything quick. I started my family. I got married. I started my family quick. And so for me, my experience was, because I didn't go to graduate school and I am a learner, the Stanford Black Leaders Program came along at a period of time where I was ready to go to that next level of like leadership and understanding of, how to build dynamic and productive teams. But even before that, I found myself when I got into new roles, and I saw where I had learning opportunities and growth opportunities, I often would seek out what's the best school. So for example, when I was a product marketing manager, it was pricing strategy was where I struggled. And I wanted to learn more skills around that. And so I sought out, at Dartmouth College Tech School, they had this wonderful pricing strategy class. And so I went to that, right? I made the investment. And I continue to do that on a regular basis. I annually take a class at Stanford or Cornell or kind of wherever, I want to grow my skill set. I will always do that. I will always do that. I think continual learning is important. I don't think you ever arrive, or you shouldn't think you ever arrive. And so for me, with the Black Leaders Program, it was one that came at a period of time where it was my next, from a leadership standpoint. And I loved it because it was an opportunity to be with like-minded people and very, very different people from different industries. And so the mix of both of those things, I think, kind of budded this a new network for me, a next level of leadership for me, and many, many more opportunities as well.
Yeah, what this highlights for me is the understanding that there's times when it's good and needed in your professional growth to be with like-minded folk, that grows you just as much as learning and being in situation with not like-minded folk, with diverse folk. I remember when I was a teacher and then later an administrator, it's like, well, why are all the Black kids hanging out together? Why are all the Latino kids hanging out together? Why? And it's like, well, why is that not okay? Well, we're not an inclusive school. We're not a this because we don't have this and that going on. So truly understanding the growth that comes in both of those opportunities and the fullness of a person, right? The fullness of a person comes from being able to go in and out of both of those situations, right? In both of those groups. What was the one thing you remember the most about that program? The one thing.
I think the one thing one of my key takeaways was we do live in a world, we live in a country that there are many injustices that happen, many injustices, and you can't change that history. You have to acknowledge it, though, in order to keep moving, keep growing, and keep evolving and driving change. And that was a real important takeaway for me, especially when you think of in light of the time period that I took. That was, I think it was post George Floyd. So it was a critical time for us. And as well as I know, legislation that's happening now, trying to dismantle Black history from education and school books and all of that. And so it amplified the need. No, we do need this. And in the role that I have and the job that I do and how I serve to keep moving, and making sure we keep educating.
I just saw American Fiction 2 days ago.
What did you think?
Oh my gosh. I didn't know what to think. Everybody's asking me. It's like I'm sitting there going, okay, this way, or is it that way? Or is it this way? Or should we look at it that way? Or what is it this way? What is it that way? I need to see it again because I found I was spending so much energy like, okay, we're going this. Okay, we're this. Oh no, this is. So I thought it was excellent. I recommend it for everybody. Go see American Fiction. I really feel it touches on what we're talking about here.
Absolutely. American Fiction and Origins are right now two that I think I said when I read the book Cast, I think one, it should be required reading. And then I saw the movie Origins and I think I've seen it 4 times now because it was so good, so rich. And those together are two, I think, in a sense, complementary in a way in which it can help shape our young people's minds to think differently, behave differently, and be strong advocates for this work.
So all of this, okay, so got some background a little bit. I think the listeners now know a little bit about you and who you are. So, but what inspired your passion for diversity, equity, and inclusion work?
I think it's something that I've always been inspired by, to be perfectly honest with you. I've always been a student of people and learning also that, and I think the transition for me from the community I grew up in to, going off to college at Boise State University, I also realized I had to create the environment that I wanted to be a part of, to not survive in, but to thrive in. And so as a grade schooler, I was probably the one that welcomed the new students and made sure that they had a table to sit at,
No doubt in my mind, that was you. No doubt, yeah.
But I also remember being the one that would hang out with the teachers of color, during lunchtime sometimes because, they were alone. And I kind of went at different levels. But I think most importantly, and my grandmother was an educator. My grandmother at 40, she went back to school. She got her master's and then went into teaching at 40. She was so cool. But she did special ed for a while. And so she would often bring us into her classrooms to work with and to tutor, students. And so it was there that I saw the differences of how people and how students learn. And I was probably a different learner. Maybe that wasn't, identified early enough. But so it's just something that I always brought with me. I was always taught to reach back and create space for others. And so even if you're the only one, don't be proud of that. That's it. And it's, by the way, a lonely place to be also. So reach back, make sure you also acknowledge the shoulders of which you stand on. And so I think that, again, my whole upbringing was a part of shaping this work that I do today. And so I'm one, very passionate about, and two, I see myself as a servant for.
So, here at the Silicon Valley Education Foundation, we work very, 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 very tightly with school districts and supporting them in shaping the STEM leaders of tomorrow. So I'm wondering, in kind of in that vein, what role do you think educational institutions play in promoting DEI principles and perspectives?
I think that they play a big role, but I think, Lisa, it has to start with, you have influencers, you have leaders, you have decision makers, and you need that diverse representation in those critical roles. And so I actually remember sitting in, school board meetings as a kid, and seeing no one or one. I remember Mr. Davis, that was an African American, that somebody that looked like me, that could represent the view or the needs of students of color. And so I think that it's a critical role. I'm often very disappointed in the lack of, I think, ownership and influence institutions should play and don't play in furthering education around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really making sure that they're building out great representation, because it's a talent pool for companies. And so it's a whole business ecosystem that is designed within. And people often think of, oh, you're just giving a handout to this group or, that group, versus, no, we want a healthy economy. So institutions play a huge role in this.
For sure. One of the things we push for is if you tout you want a diverse workforce, then you have to have diversity and access and opportunity. I mean, if that's what you truly want. Because if you want to have this thing on, this on this side, then you've got to have the input on this side.
And that's actually, that's the telltale of putting your money where your mouth is. Because you can't just do this single part. You have to look at it holistically and make sure that even if that's the greatest influence area that you have, you can also partner with these other elements, which is a testament to the work you lead.
So what advice would you give students interested in DEI careers about gaining relevant experience?
I think I would actually start with, there's a great business element of it. I feel like there's the business side of it, and then there's the moral piece of it. And it's important to understand when and where you talk about those things. And sometimes one leads the other. But at the end of the day, there is a business bottom line to it. And so for students that I kind of coach in this space is if you are a part of an employee resource group or a student, organization that you say, oh, because I did this, I would be great in this work. There's so much more to it than that. It's about business strategy, understanding business strategy, and this work aligns to and should drive business strategy of whatever nonprofit, profit, for-profit, private, it doesn't matter. And so you have to know and understand holistically all the elements. It's not just about, you're just recruiting, and it's not just about representation. It is about how you bring those differences in, you elevate that richness for greater productivity, and that productivity drives to greater profitability for the organization that you are representing.
Wow, that's interesting. Well said. Well stated. So you serve on a few education nonprofit boards. How do you bring your DEI knowledge and skills into those arenas?
So a couple, University of California at Merced, which we both both serve on that board of trustees and on the nominating committee for that. So that is a committee in which we have great influence of being able to look at the representation of your student body, your faculty, and make sure that you bring in board members that are also representative of those two elements in order to really ensure that you have people that are thinking about and really caring for the students. So UC Merced, I'm also an advisor on the Black Compute Her, which is really dedicated to supporting computer science for in tech and education for PhD level Black women. I think the number is like 2%. I might be 2% now of the world, or I'll say US, are Black PhDs. And so what is the pipeline that we can help build for that? How do we give greater access and really build a more inclusive institutions so that we can come with these great degrees, thrive, and help build a better, a bigger pipeline, as well. And then the other, which is one that I've co-founded, is CPI, Curated Pathways to Innovation. It is my heart and my soul in the sense of really creating a cradle to career pathway for women and for kids of color, for girls and for kids of color, to really have better access, as you mentioned earlier, and discipline and understanding, like, what are the intervention points where there are challenges. I mean, girls and kids of color stop raising their hand and stop competing as early as third grade in math.
I've seen it.
Yeah, math being the catalyst to STEM education and careers. And so when we know where, and oftentimes it's culturally relevant content isn't a part of the thinking of a lot of educators. So, and that goes back to your earlier question of that representation is important because it has to be threaded through for your students to have better access and better understanding of their curriculum.
Yeah, I think if somebody gave us $1 anytime you or I said access, we'd have a stack of money right now. Because embracing the students, whether they're age 4, 14, or 24, they show up with everything they've got, and they just need the opportunity and that support to thrive. All right, Lesley, we have to stop here, but coming up next time on They Are Waiting for Us, Lesley Slaton Brown, the Chief DEI Officer for the NBA, will talk about the first steps to creating a diversity, equity, and inclusion program.
Being able to admit that, there's systemic issues. Like, so what? Like, okay, we said it, now go fix it. And don't try to hide them. Don't try to cover them up. Be transparent, be open about it. If you can't talk about it, then how can you go about fixing it, right?
This has been They Are Waiting for Us. If you want to learn how to create economic opportunity through equal access to quality education and create an extraordinary learning environment focused on everyone realizing their full potential, go to drlisaandrew.com. They Are Waiting for Us is a production of Forbes Books.